All right. Larry, thanks for joining us. Hard to believe this is the 15th Mid-Atlantic CCDC,
That's amazing.
and you started in 2010, and that was
Yes, sir.
sort of yeah, when I look back at the 15 years, they're kind of, I chunk them. So the first 4 years was sort of phase one. That was when we were back and forth between Lancaster, Pennsylvania at White Wolf Security, Tim's shop, and then
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
this steak joint place that's out of business. And it's a local chain in North Baltimore County where we rented a 2,500 square foot banquet room and rented a U-Haul and hauled desktop systems with 15-inch
Oh,
CRT monitors and
the good
then
old the good old days.
the good old days, right? And then 2010 was the first year where I guess we sort of grew up a little bit and we went to SAIC, and that was the first year
Yeah.
you all joined, right?
Yes, I think Paul may have joined with you in 2009, but 2010 was the first year that I did the badges, and that was a fun year because we'd never been done before at Mid-Atlantic CCDC or in any of the CCDC regions. So it was all new and it was fun, and we didn't have a lot of budget, but we still had an amazing time. And I still remember what the system was and how it ended up getting hacked. And it was just one of those stupid integrator problems.
That was RFID
Yes.
physical security, right? What do you remember about that? What
Yep.
stands out for you?
So we built two physical access control systems, one for the students to be able to get into their competition area and one similar for the red team, because they can buy their stuff off of eBay. They can be actual users of the same systems and can hack those systems. And then there was me acting as the integrator. So I had a laptop and could rewrite badges and you name it. And, they had to figure out and ask me the right questions or reprogram badges for them and you name it. Uh, and in order to get back into the competition space, it was soft. Soft to get back into the competition space. They had to badge in, and the system would light up green, or the red team would try to badge in, and it would light up red, and they weren't allowed in. Uh, but I remember what happened is the darn integrator left his laptop unattended and logged in, and a red teamer came up and did up arrow in the terminal and saw that there was a command to write a badge previously. They placed their badge on top of the reader writer, and hit enter, and it turned his badge into one of the students' badges.
Very, very clever hacker.
Yep, real world type of scenarios, unattended stuff. They could have had remote access to the system, but no, they walked up, found it was unlocked, and physical access is key, and king for that matter. So that was
Do
a
you
fun year.
do you still have the chip in your
I
hand?
do, I do, I do.
Yeah, the
Yep.
talk a little bit about that. Do you mind? I mean, I
No, yeah,
remember you using it to test, right?
yeah, yeah. So the integrator, me, had a test card to be able to gain access to both sides, and it was an RFID implant. I have an RFID implanted in my hand. You can't see it, of course, but yeah, it's still there. It still works. It's still the same unique number, and I actually confirmed that it worked a couple of weeks ago with some of my students at SANS. So yeah, it's still
Awesome.
there. Still
So
there.
that was SAIC, and then 2011 was the first year we moved to the Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab,
Yes.
and we've been there ever since. What stands out over those years for you?
Oh, I mean, they were all so much fun over there. I mean, the ability to have additional space meant we could go bigger. One of the years, the military year, I don't remember which
Was
one
it
that was.
natural? I think it was a natural disaster or something,
Esther,
right? We did.
no, that was a different year.
Oh,
That was the
that was the blizzard.
cyberstorm. Yep,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was a
yeah.
cyberstorm. Yeah, the military one. Each one of the teams had a little station on their desk that would spit out messages, and they had badges that would interact with it in a little mesh to build local on the ground networks for them to communicate. And that was the year that we brought ham radio as well. Um, we brought in two ham radio stations. We got to go up on the back lawn and stand up these huge towers to be able to do ham radio special event station. Wi-Fi was in play for those, and our ham radio special station call sign was W3P for
Nice.
WEP. One of the broken encryptions for Wi-Fi at the time, which was also a clue to them that all the encryption was web. So
And right, that year we got to work with Maryland Emergency Management Association, right?
yes,
Our agency, right?
yep,
MEMA, and they came and practiced.
yep, yep.
Um,
That was also, I think that was the first year that they came and had a team to participate or volunteer, and then they saw the value in the exercises, and then they came and brought teams to participate in some fashion other years.
every year, yeah. In fact, they're still participating. So it's all virtual this year, as you can imagine. APL,
Sure.
they closed down all public facilities. So the K Center where we were, right,
Yep.
around the second week in April. So obviously everything is all virtual, but we still have some of the folks participating from that from MEMA in today's event.
That's great. That's
How
great.
about, so then we did healthcare IT. That might have been like, I mean, it's hard to say what
Oh,
was the best because they all had some great stuff. But that
they did.
you have behind you one of the
Yeah.
remnants, right, from
Yeah.
that green box, right? That was
Yeah.
healthcare IT.
That was healthcare. Yeah. So with healthcare IT, they got badges. The badges themselves were not super fancy. They had a barcode on them. Very reminiscent of what I was dealing with in healthcare for access to systems. If you wanted to gain access to a parking lot, you had to swipe a barcode. You had a barcode on the back of your badge, and if you wanted to access one of the stations to dispense, ironically, masks and gloves and those types of things, you used your badge and had a barcode on it. So we went with barcodes. And while the badge was simple, it gave you access to some systems that would dispense things for you, which you had to control. And in the case that we did, it was a medication dispensation station. So that was the box. You presented a barcode to it, and the box would either open or not open. And when you got it open, it had candy inside.
And
So
was the red team successful in being able to mess with that
they
system at all?
they were. They tried to do lots of physical stuff to it, and yeah, they got to do some physical stuff to it. And then the students had to do some try to do additional protections. And I remember one of my favorites, the team captain, had a dog, and she had the dog crate in the back of her car and a padlock. And she went out to her car and got the dog crate and put the med station inside the dog crate. Additional physical security controls, which was great. And then she had to make the key available at the team table so that everyone who needed to get access to that physical security control could still do that. So that
Awesome.
was great. Yeah, and absolutely, the red team did end up, with their own candy and candy from other med stations once they figured out how to get some actual copies of barcodes because they were all sequentially numbered. They just had to figure out which way to go, up or down.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that was the year with medical health records and right,
Yes.
people patients were dying, right? There was a whole sort of
Yeah.
dead zombie theme going
Yep, they
on,
did.
right?
They hit zombies, and yeah, I think that was the first year with Nerf guns too.
Nerf
Yeah,
guns and yeah,
maybe.
and see, so Costas is still playing the CE role, and
Oh.
I'm pretty sure that he was losing his mind as the CEO of the Health Collective, right? Because patients were, I mean, literally, I think we called him on his phone while he was doing an interview with one of the team captains and said that a patient had died, and that poor team captain, had to.
Oh.
So that was healthcare IT. People died. It
Yeah.
was serious business. People died, I should say.
Yep.
And then we did. And these are in no particular order because my memory is horrible. But
Yeah.
one year the scenario was power company, right? Power distribution. We did smart meters,
smart
right?
smart meters. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So everybody had their own smart meter, and we had a station that was reading all of the usage. And all the red team folks got badges as well. And they were all Arduino based. The code was available. They could update all of their code to fake being the other teams to have their energy usage go like crazy. Which then, of course, when your energy usage goes like crazy, you typically get called by the feds because they think you're having a grow operation or something, which nowadays is a little different, right?
Yeah. Right.
But at the time, yeah, or the power company starts to investigate because you don't have solar installed and you have a negative usage. So how did that happen? So
And
yeah, everybody got to have their own power meters.
And they were running ZigBee, I
And they
believe,
they
right?
were, yep, ZigBee. Yep, ZigBee. That was a fun year for actually the construction because someone had to solder all of these. It was my buddy Darren and I ended up having to solder and assemble all of these, and it was weeks upon weeks upon weeks of the two of us assembling those at my mother's kitchen table.
And you had to cut them, right? You go to like a local makerspace or something and get some sort of, were they laser cut or something, those badges?
Yeah, so our local makerspace had a laser cutter, and we went and got all of the top parts for the red and blue parts cut, and we did all the design work for that. Um, and it was lots of fun. A labor of love.
Labor of love. Talk about the student teams, right? Because, essentially they weren't given much information before the event, right, about the badges. So they
Right.
roll in on a Friday, and you
Yep.
would do, as part of our opening debrief, you would give them some information. You might
Mhm.
tell them where to go to get some source code or give them some pointers. But generally over the years, how did they handle that? And did they get better, about the same? Were there any change or?
They were about this. Some of the teams were more focused on it. It was also very much one of those things that they could take back to their hotel rooms after end of competition and start to play with. So they could be up all night playing with some of these stuff, in addition to building all of their other plans and things that they were doing. Um, there were some teams that definitely took it to heart. Um, there were other teams that kind of ignored it altogether, and that was pretty much typical through all of the
Hmm,
various years.
hmm,
A lot of them just had no exposure to hardware,
hmm.
and or any concept of having to do the physical security stuff in combination with electronics and or hardware. So it was really, I think it was an eye opener for them to really be exposed to something they'd never seen before.
A real eye opener, huh? Well, that sort of hits on one of the points of this event, which is to expose the students to technologies that they're typically not seeing in the classroom, right?
Right. Right.
And I think that certainly met that criteria for sure. I remember the red teamers sort of licking their chops each year. It seemed like the gear that they would bring in, they had their
Oh.
own separate kits, their
Yep.
toolboxes and with the various sorts of implements, right? Ready for
Yep.
what has Larry got this year. And
Exactly.
I think they were as excited as you were for those
Oh,
badges.
oh, oh, absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, they'd bring like software-defined radios and ham radios and all sorts of Wi-Fi gear and soldering irons and just all sorts of components, and it ballooned. It literally, they just started bringing more and more gear to help support that stuff. And then they realized Larry makes this hackable in 2 days. We probably don't need to go super crazy. We just need to use some brains. So yeah, yeah, that was also one of the other challenges, was to make something the students had never experienced, make it usable, but make it hackable both by them, defendable by them, by the students, and hackable by the red team in 2 days.
And usually the budget was like it, well, I don't even remember. What
Oh,
what would you get? Was it? I honestly don't even remember.
it
Was it
was it,
$5 a badge or was
it,
it more?
I think by the time we were done, we were in the $35 per badge range. And you talk about all these conferences doing the electronic badges, and in many of the cases they're significantly cheaper because they're buying them in significantly larger quantities. Ours were, we had 110 badges roughly every year. um, and at the time, some of the things that we were doing in a badge was very novel. No one had ever done it before. To put ZigBee on a badge, no one had really done that at scale. One or two, and they were always huge, and the components were expensive.
Yeah.
So I think we struck a really good balance. And by the time we were done, yeah, it got expensive, but we were doing new things that students had never seen, and made it easy for them to interact with.
I have a picture somewhere of a pallet with, they might have been Raspberry Pis, and I mean, I don't know. I feel like there was about 700 of them on the pallet or something.
That's what it felt like.
Or so
Yep.
smart meters. So what were what did we do after that?
We had Cyberstorm. That was the natural disaster. And that one was a little weird for me because in the initial go rounds for that, it was supposed to be aviation. So we did all of our designs for the badge around aviation and aircraft and airports. And then it got changed sort of very close to the end to be the natural disaster stuff. So we kind of had to make 9 months of development fit into a new scenario. I think we did a pretty good job in that we effectively turned that into flight delays, and then they had to manage flight delays and so forth because of the weather, and that their critical resources needed to arrive via aircraft, and how were they going to manage that, and were fake aircraft coming in that would prevent landing, and all of those types of things. So the badges, those badges were Arduinos with NRF 24L01 chips that were acting as aircraft. So everyone was wearing a little aircraft beacon around their neck, which the code was freely available, and all the red teamers could change the aircraft beacons to be other aircraft, including those of the blue teams. So,
Operation Cyber Blizzard, right?
yes, yes. That was in the stack of shirts. Instead, I wore this. I went for the old one instead.
Nice. You went old school. Awesome. You went with the ninjas. Let's see. There was secure voting, right? That might have been. Were you involved with that one? That was 2013. That's when the country of Pakistan was first introduced.
Yeah.
The state-sponsored APT. And I don't remember what we did for badges.
I don't remember what we did for badges either on that one.
I remember we had a company out of Lancaster that came and set up the voting system, and the participants got a card, they showed up, and then they could vote, and we had a big screen, but I can't remember what we did for badges.
I don't remember that might have been, was that the one where the military was involved to prevent coup and that type of stuff? Maybe. Could be.
I wonder if was that the year we did that, where you set up the ham radio antennas, and we did ham radio stuff. It might have been that one.
I think that might have been the year.
That was secure voting. That was the year we introduced the country of Pakistan, and they've played a part in every scenario since. So this year's scenario is Artificially Intelligent Institute, pronounced AIAI, and the I in the little, and they essentially make AI software machine learning technology that they sell to government agencies, intelligence agencies, law enforcement, private sector organizations. And we were going to do a whole bunch of stuff with IoT and these dumb IoT devices running. Some of them run machine learning software, and there was just going to be sort of this blend of, but of course without much of an on-prem. So that was sort of the plan this year. We've had IoT over the years. We've had web. I mean, the first year we had some IP cameras. We had
the IP-enabled power strips.
Power strips that had an IP address on them. I mean, that blew people's minds when they realized that.
Yeah, I know. I remember Tim loving those because all of a sudden all their computers turn off. I remember Tim being particularly evil with those.
And you also were sort of dual-hatted too, because then we experimented a number of years with doing live play-by-play and analysis, right? We'd build out these big sets, and we had Paul Asadorian and John Strand doing play-by-play, and you were dual-hatted. You were also at one point, right? You were like the reporter in the pit, right? Talk about that and sort of what that was like for the teams and the players to have to deal with not only just the pressure of the event, but now now they got a guy sticking a microphone in their face. And
I mean, hyperrealism, is sort of the way I like to classify some of that stuff, is that it was very much a real world scenario condensed down into maybe something that was a little shorter than normal. And those students had to learn so much and do so much in such a short period of time, including dealing with all of the management and the press, just like they would in a major incident. Like in a major incident or some major transaction or something is going wrong, much like they're having, the media is calling and I want to know what the heck's going on, and somebody's got to talk to them and have the right message. So that was great for them to give them that real world problem as well. And
Well,
then moving into that, my last year um, was lots of fun in that it was that was the only part that I was doing was the live show, and didn't have badges and that type of stuff. And it was you, me, and a couple of other folks, um, and that was my oldest daughter's first HackerCon, because she came with me that year. She didn't. We took her day out of school, and um, she had a great time. That was also the year that was sponsored by Hershey's. So there was pallets of candy bars in the back room. Yeah, much to my disappointment.
uh,
She loved it though.
oh yeah, I bet. I
So
bet. Yeah, what was I was gonna ask you something about well just what were things that you saw that improved over the years, the blue teams especially? What are the things that, because you were more than just the badge guy, right?
yeah,
And so, what, from your perspective, what were the things that they seemed to get better with as time went on?
sure. So in the beginning, specifically coming out of their education, we saw a lot of them not have a lot of concepts about Windows domains, Windows Active Directory, workstation controls. They just didn't have a lot of hands-on experience with Windows. A lot of it was because it was what the universities were doing with all the open source software and Linux
Mm,
and so forth, which is good, but doesn't necessarily prepare them for the real world that's using Windows.
mm,
Um, and over the years, I saw a lot of the students be much better prepared with hands-on managing Windows Active Directory and workstations through all the various controls there. And
interesting.
they really stepped up their game and had a lot of knowledge going into those games, what they could do to lock down workstations and servers in commercial software.
Huh.
So that
Interesting.
that was that was the big one that I noticed over the years. They got much better at Windows.
Much better at Windows. I remember now, so you were talking about hyperrealism, right? Is that the word
Yeah,
you used
yeah,
when a condensed hyper realistic experience?
yeah,
What would you say to, so one of the criticisms of this event is, um, oftentimes people look down on it and they use the term toys and games, right? And, sort of as a derogatory term, right? And what would you say, to people that sort of don't look at this as like toys and games and, oh, it's okay, so it's not realistic because it's so condensed and whatever, and the times to complete stuff are, not realistic. How would
sure.
you respond to that?
So agreed that it is condensed. It is, very stressful and those types of things. The time to complete some of the stuff is not realistic or is very short. But the things that you were asking them to complete were absolutely things that could have been done in those timeframes. Very much like if we were in the real world and not in this game, um, that you'd be given a task at your day job to go complete this security task, and you'd have 6 weeks to do it, which would be completely reasonable. But you're potentially doing this across thousands of systems. You need to get buy-in from these other folks. Yeah, in this game, the buy-in from the folks you needed were all sitting around that table. 5 of you. You could make a decision instantly. Whether or not it was the right one is a different story altogether. And you'd have time to be able to implement those things in, say, half an hour, which is maybe sometimes the deadlines for these types of things. The problem is that you often had competing things that needed to happen at the same time with the same resources. Welcome to my day job.
Hmm.
So every single bit of that was all based in reality. Sure, it was a game, but based in reality and the same challenges that these students were going to face when they go in the real world.
Yeah, interesting. And everybody in, as the years progress, right? Obviously, the demand for qualified information security talent is increased,
Sure,
and everybody's screaming for talent. And most of the talent management strategies are effectively poaching, what we call tip of the spear, right? The specialists that are in such short supply, right?
sure.
And so companies are going to have to get creative if they're going to be competitive in terms of their hiring strategies. And these events they're underutilized in my opinion, right? I mean, obviously we'd get a boatload of sponsors, right? We back in sort of the heyday, right? When you guys were involved, I consider that sort of the heyday. That was really, I think we were at the apex of our game. We were really firing on all cylinders, and the main reason those organizations wrote checks to sponsor that event was because of that recruiting, right? We had a job fair, we had a networking event, and then those companies not only could get resumes ahead of time, but they could, if the smarter ones would start to volunteer and have some of their employees in the pit with you, right? Working with, as proxies between the student teams and the operations, and they could actually see, not only see how the players were performing in that pressure cooker situation, but be right next to them, right? And and it sort of, I sort of shake my head when I hear about all this whole demand. Clearly there's a demand for qualified talent. I'm not sure if the demand is as large as people think it is. And there are these pockets, there are these places where people could tap into the best and the brightest, and and they tend to be sort of underutilized. And so I don't know if there's that's really, I guess, more just a comment than anything, right?
But I remember the meet and greet type of events and the job fairs and the networking. And I think back to some of the folks that I interacted with the students, and that I can remember a number of them actually going to work for some of these places and then showing back up a couple of years later as part of the same group who had sponsored multiple years, saying, "Hey, you remember me? I was here 2 years ago, and guess who I work for now?" And
incredible.
So there was a number of those success stories that I remember coming out of those.
Incredible.
So.
Well, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you coming on and reminiscing and sharing. And
Anytime.
we had a lot of fun, and I appreciate all that you continue to do for the community. So take care. Be safe there. Okay.
Absolutely.
Take care. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, Casey.
Best to you.